Hi guys! In this episode of In the Life of Paige, I am really excited to finally be sharing with you the full story in regards to how I realized that I was a trans woman. And in particular because I feel like kind of an unconventional one, because a lot of the time you might have people who knew that they were trans from like a young age, and some people who didn't realize that they were trans until they were old enough. For me, it's kind of a mixture of both. It depends on how you look at it, as you will find out, but I kind of both knew from like basically my first memories, but it also didn't take me until like I was almost 18 years old to realize that I was transgender, you know? But I'm gonna get through all of that in a bit. Before that, I want to ask you, what do you think of my new case for my phone? I'm really happy with it. Now that I'm 2 months on E13, I honestly have kind of stopped giving a fuck about how open my femininity has become, like in regards to how I behave, how I dress, how I look, and how my fucking phone case looks. Like before, I would be scared because of people's reactions about it and their comments and stuff, but now I don't care. I'm really happy with it. It's annoying. The reason why I had to buy it is annoying, because I had to buy it because I broke my phone screen for like the 4th time since I've had this phone. It's kind of insane. I've basically paid more in repairs for the phone than I actually paid for the goddamn phone. And I finally got myself a case so I don't break the screen anymore. And I'm really happy with it because it's not only cute, but it's also a reference to one of my favorite video games ever, which is Life is Strange. Because one of the most iconic images from Life is Strange is the blue butterfly. See? And it's not even like a merchandise from Life is Strange. I just saw it and it kind of reminded me of that, and that's why I got it. And again, like I mentioned in the last video, I got myself a Blahaj friend. I love it. Oh my god, I love it so much. I love my cuddly friend. Genuinely, if you are trans, even if you're not trans, honestly, get yourself a goddamn plushie to hug when you sleep, or to just hug when you feel bad. It helps so much. It's insane. Maybe it's just the estrogen in me, but I love cuddling that thing. It's one of the changes about HRT that it's really so sexistly stereotypical, but it's a nice change. Like wanting to cuddle, having that urge to cuddle is so good. But yeah, this is not the topic of this video though. The topic of this video is my story as a trans woman. And I might have brought it up before. I don't even know at this point. I've been a YouTuber for like 5 years. I can't remember all my videos, but it's quite the long story. So I guess we should start from the very beginning, which is basically, I guess, some of my first memories, which don't necessarily signify that I am trans per se, because dressing as a girl with like your mom's dresses, just because you were born a boy doesn't necessarily make you trans, because gender presentation and gender identity are two very different things, and just because one wears female clothes doesn't make them a woman, you know? But it's not like it ended there. It's just in connection to everything else. It really likely is a sign that I am trans. It's a confirmation that I am trans. Because genuinely, one of my earliest memories when I was like 3 or 4 years old, probably 4, I remember being dressed up in old dresses, which might be my mom's. I think they're probably my mom's, or maybe even my 2 older cousins, because I was getting dressed up by my 2 older cousins in those dresses, and I would parade around the house wearing them, happily having fun, and all the family laughing and having fun. And it was great. I honestly, until somewhat recently, I had forgotten how great of a memory it was, and I had forgotten it as a memory almost, honestly. Maybe I kind of locked it away at a certain point in my life, but I kind of forgot that I did that. And it's not like I'm imagining it and like I dreamt it at some point. No, that happened. I remember that. I remember points in my life where I've remembered it before, so it's not a dream that I had. I remember doing that. And the dressing in female clothes didn't really stop there. There was one time, probably not much later compared to after this, where there was a funeral for a relative, and once again I was left with my two older female cousins who are 5 years older than me, and it wasn't until like when I was like 5 years old that my younger cousins started to get born. So basically I was the closest to those two older female cousins, and one time, like I said, there was a funeral for a relative, so I was left with those two older female cousins to be taken care of by them. And I remember that we played dress up, and I remember that I dressed up in a wedding gown. And it was great. I remember loving it so much. It was great. Once again, another memory around the same time. This time it's not about dress up, because at that point it kind of stopped being a thing for one reason or another. But another memory, distinct memory that I have, that I think is a bigger signifier of me being trans, is I remember being in the shower with my mom, because I was too young to shower by myself, so I was being showered by her. And I remember commenting on the fact that I was really excited to grow up and have boobs, basically. I remember saying to my mom, I can't wait until I grow up and have boobs as big as yours, or something along those lines. Which is honestly a little awkward for me to mention. I feel awkward mentioning it, but it is something that I said. And I feel like I kind of remember the vibe, at least, of her reaction. But it was something along those lines of like, no you won't, and don't ever mention it again, kind of thing. You know, it was a very stern reaction there about that comment. And you can certainly chalk up something like this to me just not knowing the difference between men and women, but the fact that my brain assumed that I was gonna grow breasts could be a sign. You never know, because to be honest, the signs kind of never stopped. They just kind of kept popping up again and again and again. I think after that, for maybe a couple of years, at least, I don't have any distinct memories of anything. But for a couple of years, it kind of quieted down a little bit until when I was maybe like, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 11 years old. I remember, and this is when my feelings of wanting to be a girl officially started. I remember having a dream where me and my school crush swapped bodies. And to this day, I still remember the feeling that I felt of having her body and having her, I guess, boobs and stuff, because she was a very early bloomer. So I guess it must have been closer to 11 than 8, but whatever. And I remember how at peace I felt, how right it felt. Honestly, until I've started HRT, and even just now I'm kind of realizing how this is the exact same feeling that I'm feeling right now. With the HRT and the development of my body into the feminine direction, it's the exact same feeling that I felt in that goddamn dream. It's the feeling of everything being right, everything fitting in the right place. I genuinely just kind of realized how it's the exact same feeling. Because I've been thinking about this a little bit recently, but I just kind of now like really solidified on the fact that it is the exact same feeling of like euphoria or just feeling content with your body. And that is a dream that stuck with me forever, practically. I still remember it as if it happened yesterday. I remember all the details about it. I remember even reenacting the dream afterwards. I think, considering some of the reenactments of it that I remember, it was probably, closer to 11 years old for sure. But yeah, I remember reenacting the dream because of how much I liked it. And I feel like this is maybe where my interest in body swap stories and gender bending also kind of developed. But this is officially where I started to wish that I was a girl. And around that period of time, there was also this particular TV show, which most of you have probably not heard of because it's a very, very obscure show that, funnily enough, you can only find a dub of it online. You can only find my country's dub of it. Because it's originally a French TV show called, I know what it's called. It's called Vice Versa. But it was translated in my country as The Two Faces of Thomas, which was basically about a boy, a teenage boy, who hates girls, who after going through an accident in a laboratory gets an injury on his arm, which whenever he touches it, he turns into a girl. And you know full well how excited and interested that concept made me. I've at times when I felt like a little bit of a imposter syndrome about whether I'm truly trans or not, whenever I'm feeling worried about whether I'm trans or not, I think back to that show and maybe whether it made me trans. Like some bigots and transphobes would say, oh yeah, watching this shit as a child is what made you trans. See, it's a virus, it's a transgender thing. No, I had the feelings even before then. That TV show just basically drew the picture that I already had in my mind, but I just couldn't put it on paper, you know? But I really loved the show. I still remember so much of it, and I've rewatched it even recently. Sadly, I can't really cover it on the channel because it's either in French or in my country's dub, so I can't really do it in English. But if you can find it online and find it with subtitles, it's not great, but if you're trans, I feel like you might find some satisfaction in it, because I certainly did. And it was one of my favorite shows to watch around that period of time, and I was really ashamed. I remember like going in like the one room that was very rarely used in the house but still had like its own TV, and I would watch it there because I was ashamed to watch it in front of others. But I vividly remember how much I loved it and how much I wished that that would happen to me. That's practically where, again, like I said, my wishes about wanting to be a girl started. And it never really stopped after that. It just kept propping up in one way or another. I wanted to cross-dress whenever I saw female clothes, to the point where it became an uncontrollable urge even at times, you know? I've cross-dressed in female clothes wherever I could find it. Old clothes, old nightgowns, old dresses, my mom's clothes. Yes, I've definitely worn them, even though she doesn't really wear particularly feminine clothes. I still made them work. I remember getting one of her like vests, like, you know what a vest is. It's like, I think that's the word for it, right? Give me a sec. It's like one of those like thermal vests. I'm gonna put a picture if I don't forget. And I would just turn it around, basically. I would wear it backwards, and because I was tiny, I could wear it as a dress. I remember doing that. Basically, not much changed in that regard from in the years like 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. I just kept cross-dressing at any opportunity I could get. I felt agony about the fact that I wasn't a girl. I prayed to God that I would turn into a girl and I would wake up being a girl. I felt shame multiple times about my cross-dressing and how I was not able to stop cross-dressing because it was a constant urge that I had to do it. And several times I kept throwing out or returning all the feminine clothes that I had conjured up, because having them close to me would just make me want to do it more, you know? So I really felt a lot of shame, a lot of pain. I remember several times I was in like awful agony about the fact that I wasn't born a girl, and I just didn't really realize that there was something I could do about it because I was too young. I didn't really know about the concept of trans people, not in a meaningful manner anyway, because maybe the concept of people who change their sex was a thing that I had heard of, but it wasn't really in my head as a thing that I could do and as a thing that it's normal to do. Like, that's something just freaky people who have some mental issues do, you know? I still remember one time I read a newspaper and there was a story about a 5-year-old from, like, I think maybe the Netherlands, who had came out as trans to his parents, and it was a story about how the parents were treating their child properly and like allowing them to transition and everything. And I remember how I wish that that had happened to me, but obviously it couldn't. I remember somewhere around 2014, 2015, when I had a smartphone finally, and internet actually didn't have a constant internet connection. I had to rely on Wi-Fi. So on my way home from school, I would stop at a local cafe which had Wi-Fi, and I would look up stories about, well, I didn't know the concept of trans people still. Necessarily, I didn't know the words and stuff, but I remember reading stories about people who had transitioned. I vividly remember reading a story about a trans woman who had went through bottom surgery and her experience with that. And again, I wanted that for myself, you know? But for the most part, nothing really changed between the period of that dream that I had and 2016, 2017, depending on how you look at it. Because around 2016 is probably the first time I heard about trans people. I remember watching the TOC channel, which I don't know if it's exactly the same channel as for Americans who are watching this video, but on this channel they show the story about Jazz Jennings, who you might know as a famous trans woman who was trans from a young age, you know? And I vividly remember in this very room how one night when I was watching the TV, I said, man, good for her. Too bad that I'm not like her though. I just want to be a girl. I don't know why it didn't click in my head that I was trans exactly like her, but it's like I literally was looking at her, seeing her, and saying, nah fam, I'm not that. I'm definitely not that. And it's not like I held like any kind of contempt for her. Like at best, I might have, my transphobic brain at the time might have forced itself to see her, try to see her masculine qualities about her and try to see her as a boy, not as a girl. But I still like respected her, I guess you could say. And I still didn't put two and two together for some reason. it didn't click for me that, hey, you're like this, you can do this. Or at least I didn't see it as like an achievable thing, so my brain didn't even allow myself to like consider the possibility as a way to protect me from the pain and suffering of trying to come to terms with that fact would bring. And it did bring a lot of suffering, because after that, after like reading more and just learning more about transgender people. Oh, by the way, I kind of forgot to talk about this, because actually there was some major developments. There was some developments between 2011 and 2016 in terms of my transness. Throughout most of that period, the way I coped with my transness was reading trans TG stories, TG transformation stories, in which the people either swapped bodies, got gender bent, or other stuff like that. So for the longest time, that was my coping mechanism, and I did so much reading. I've practically read every story on the TG Crystal story site, if you want to look it up. I don't know if it's still easily available, because I think it might be an archived site now. But I've read practically every story on that website. I've read a lot of the stories on Big Closet, or even on nifty.org. I think it was, another one was called. Like, I've read a lot of stories on practically every TG story site. So yeah, one of my favorite ones was actually Fiction Branches, because it was it was a website where you could make branching out storylines. That was pretty cool. But that was most of the development around that period of time. It was just me consuming a lot of body swap and gender bending content, because that's the one way I could, I guess, interpret my feelings at the time. And for most of that period of time, I wasn't even like doing anything sexual about it, because it wasn't until my late teens that I actually started doing that stuff. Because for the longest time, I've even considered myself asexual. It wasn't until, like, honestly, literally, like, maybe like last week, that I realized that maybe I'm actually bisexual. But if you want to learn more, check out my video talking about my 2-month HRT update, you know? But yeah, so around 2016, I started to learn more about transgender people, and I was starting to come to terms with what would it mean for me to go through with it. Because I thought at the time that it would be too hard, practically impossible for me to like become a woman. I didn't even know that you would go on like HRT and then you would do surgeries and stuff. I didn't know the details of that. But I just thought that it was an impossible thing for me to achieve. Partially because it was something I wasn't super informed about, but also because at the time I was a very cowardly and just very self-conscious and anxious person who really couldn't do anything on their own, you know? I literally asked my mom for how to do everything and for advices about stuff. And it's only, funnily enough, through finally coming to terms with the fact that I am trans and accepting that and trying to make the steps afterwards that I've become a more confident and capable person of taking care of myself and doing things for myself and not having to rely on others. Because if it was up to my mom, I wouldn't be getting HRT, you know? It's all my work. It's all I did. I worked my ass off to earn the money, to pay for freezing of sperm in case I want children. I worked my ass off to earn enough money to pay for a psychologist, a psychiatrist, an endocrinologist, and for all the HRT that I have right now, which is quite a lot. Once again, check out the last video that I did where I talk about my changes. You will see how much I've actually stocked up. So yeah, at the time, I thought it was impossible for me to do it. I even thought about the possibility of, if you guys have heard about the concept of cryopreservation of people, like a real thing, like, have you heard of cryonics? Which is where people who don't want to die necessarily, it's basically the concept of cryopreserving people's bodies in the hope of, in the future, humanity having the technology to revive those people and bring them back to life and keep them alive forever, basically. It's basically religion for non-religious people, kind of. I don't want to mock it, because I still don't necessarily disagree with that concept, and if I do have the money, I probably would like to preserve my body in that regard. But at the same time, it is kind of like an unlikely concept when you really think about it, that it's gonna actually happen. And if I went into that thing because at the time I was really scared of the concept of death. Like, I hadn't come to terms with it, I guess, as much as I have nowadays. Now that my like grandparents are getting up there in age, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the next like 5 years one of them dies, which most likely will mean that the other one's gonna die, because I don't see the other one surviving for a while after. But that's a topic. That's a different topic. But basically, my brain, in fear or whatever you want to call it, like would prefer for me to freeze my body and hope that whenever I'm revived in the future, I could then transition into a woman. That seemed more believable and easier for me to do than transitioning. That's how scared of the consequences of transitioning I was, because I didn't know how my parents would react, especially my mom, with whom I was close, and I'm still very close. I'm probably the closest I've been with her ever, honestly, now. But we'll get there, don't worry. So, yeah, I had a lot of anguish around that concept of like having to wait until my next life, essentially, to be a woman. And it really hurt me. And at a certain point, I was starting to like come to terms that, hey, maybe however hard it is, I'm gonna have to do this. I'm gonna have to do this. And that kind of started to lead me on the path of maybe considering the fact that, hey, it's okay to be a cross-dresser. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to wear women's clothes, it's fine. It's not fucked up. It's not crazy. So I kind of started to consider myself a cross-dresser. Then I went into the idea that maybe I was gender fluid, because hey, I kind of like to be feminine, but I don't necessarily hate being masculine necessarily, even though, yes, I do. It's just that those feelings were more subtle back then, too subtle for me to realize exactly what they were. But that feeling of wrongness every time I looked at myself in the mirror or in a picture, or just whenever I was wearing masculine clothes, that wrongness is dysphoria. I realize that now. So, like many trans people, I did go through the stage of thinking that I was gender fluid, but when you think about it, gender fluid people like to go between the two. You know, for me though, I didn't want to be a guy. I wanted the feminine all the time. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, hey, I actually don't want to be masculine, kind of, ever. And it's really interesting what finally cracked my egg. And it's always going to have a special place in my heart, the thing that broke my egg. That being a goddamn K-pop song. I don't know why that was the particular moment where I cracked, but it is how it happened. I became a K-pop fan in 2016. In August, and I've been K-pop fan since. I even covered it on the channel. But it wasn't until October, I believe it was the 8th of October. Hell, I even remember the date. 8th of October 2017, when one of my favorite groups at the time, and maybe even debatably to this day, because they are still a solid group, that being the girl group Twice, released their first Japanese single called One More Time. I don't know what it is about that song in particular that really made me depressed about not being a girl, because there has been other K-pop songs and K-pop music videos where I saw cute, happy girls wearing feminine clothes and being all happy and feminine, and me not being that, making me feel depressed. But that particular music video just kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back, because after watching the music video a couple of times, I was thinking about, why am I feeling sad? Why do I feel like shit as I'm listening to this song and watching this music video? And it just kind of dawned on me for some reason that I'm trans. I don't even know. It's like one of those things which you somehow, your brain fucking predicts, but you don't know how you came to that conclusion, because there there wasn't a moment where I was like considering the possibility that I was trans. No, from one day to the other, went from non-trans to trans. And it's this sudden change that I feel like makes my situation and my journey so like unique, because I haven't seen anybody who just like from had the wishes to be a girl throughout their life, but had this one moment where you just kind of all of a sudden realized that you were trans, despite the fact that you were like had seen some trans people on TV or had some connection to like some trans related content, but it wasn't until a random fucking music video just broke your egg. Like, that's the most random thing ever. And to this day, that is a very special song in my heart. I listen to it well, I don't really listen to it nowadays all the time, but I listen to it a lot around the time, and it made me feel so euphoric and kind and at peace, kind of like how E13 feels right now. But obviously, it didn't last for long. The suffering just begun there. Because then afterwards, after I realized that I was trans, obviously I started to read up on it more and what I can do and what I should do and all those stuff. And I just want to mention something that I really hope people don't take it the wrong way. I know like bigots would take it the wrong way. Like, this is the kind of like bullets that bigots look for whenever they're attacking trans people for being trans and being groomed into being trans and all those stuff. Because for me, I remember around 2015, 2016, for some reason, I really had the urge to potentially move out to a different country as soon as I turned 18. I thought about Korea after I became a K-pop fan, but I also thought about the USA. And like I said earlier, around that time, I also found doing anything in life on my own very hard. I needed help for like major stuff like that. I needed guidance and help and for people to push me. So I, funnily enough, wished that I had an actual reason to motivate me to move out of my country. I genuinely remember that one day I wished that I was LGBT, so that would be a reason that would motivate me for me to move out of my country, because at the time I was very frustrated with my country for one reason or another or whatever. And I wished for that. And God didn't grant me the wish to turn me into a girl, at least not literally. But he did grant me the wish to turn out to be LGBT, I guess. It's really funny because this is exactly, like, this is such a bullshit situation. Like, how likely is that you would have all these signs of you being trans and you would want to move out of your country and you would look for a motivation to move, for a reason that would motivate you to move out of your country, and you would wish that you would be LGBT because that would be a great motivation for you to move out. Well, yeah, but it also would give you a lot of anguish when you're not able to and you find it increasingly hard to do so. So that wasn't fun. So basically for the following at least 2 years, I tried my best to like figure out a plan, figure out an idea about how could I possibly transition. I thought about, again, moving out of the country, moving to the UK. I had started to look for like flats and stuff, and I started to educate myself about the prices of flats and the prices of everything, basically. How could I find a job? How could I finance everything? And I had even like genuinely kind of prepared myself to like potentially move to England, because back then they were still in the EU. As soon as I graduated. That obviously didn't happen, but I really, really wanted it to happen. I just ultimately found it too hard and too impossible to do so. And they also left the European Union before I graduated anyway. Because I believe they left in the beginning of 2019, and I think that might have been ultimately the thing that stopped me, actually. Because I graduated in May of 2019, and I believe they left in the beginning of 2019. So where my life could have went if they were still in the EU, who knows? But yeah, so basically my hope was that with the YouTube channel I would earn enough money to transition. To move to a different country and transition. But once again, that became just increasingly unlikely because none of the countries were a particularly satisfying destination, because I still would have preferred a country, the language of which I speak, like Ireland or the Netherlands being my only options. But Ireland is not great with the trans healthcare. They're fine once you've transitioned, but it's not really great when it comes to the healthcare stuff. And the Netherlands is just not great with the healthcare stuff either. But that is on top of like other stuff not being that easy as well. So my option for that period of time was actually going to Ireland, but that turned out to be super fucking expensive because renting in Ireland is insane. So even that fell through, and ultimately I kind of started to consider the possibility of just doing it in my country, ultimately, because there was no other option. It's not feasible or realistic for me to move to a different country, especially at that point at which I had bought my computer, because I was hoping that maybe by the time I graduated, because my mom had promised to like take out a loan for me as a celebration of me graduating, because in my country, whenever you graduate school, typically people like to make the people graduating make like big parties where they invite all their friends and relatives and celebrate the fact that they are 18 years old and they've graduated and all that stuff. And since I was a very introverted person, I didn't really have an interest to have something like that. So I was like, I told mom, you would be taking out a loan if we did this anyway, so might as well you give me that loan and I make something out of it. And I have this YouTube channel thanks to that, So having the PC and all these other stuff that I would have to like potentially take with me if I move, it just became very unfeasible for me to do it. So I kind of started to think and wonder and suffer with no end in sight. But yeah, me not being able to move to a different country really stunted me about what I could possibly do, because it was still not really an option for me to transition here, because my country is bigoted, the people are bigoted, my family would never accept me. It would obviously be far more easier, 10 times more easier to do it here, as I've experienced ultimately. But I still didn't consider it as a plan. So I was like, okay, let's start a YouTube channel, because that's something that I wanted to do anyway, and let's hope I can make enough money off of it to move. And that didn't happen. I did meet some really great people on my YouTube channel. One of my good friend Yuri, who has been great mental help. And honestly, if he wasn't around for me, I probably wouldn't be still here, because there were some really dark times that I went through in like 2020, 2021, 2022 even, that if he wasn't around as a helper, I wouldn't have survived. If he wasn't there as an option for like potentially if I wanted to move to like the Netherlands, I wouldn't be alive today. So I want to thank him personally for being there for me. That's around the time when I kind of started to potentially consider the possibility of just doing DIY HRT and doing it on my own by ordering stuff online. The stuff online without prescription. And I did successfully order some, and I did try it for a couple of months, but ultimately I would run out of money and I would not be able to continue, But finally, when the end of 2022 came, I was done. I was getting to the point where I was arguing with myself about why I shouldn't unalive myself. I had started to conjure up scenarios in my head about what would be the least painful way to go. You know? And one of the ones that was really stuck in my head was jumping off a bridge. Which is scary because it's way too easy for me to do it and be done, you know? And on top of everything, it started to just really piss me off that another year kept passing. And I was still not making any moves forward. I was still not making moves. I was becoming 20 years old, 21 years old, 22 years old, and no change, no improvement. I was still stuck in the same hole as when I was 19 years old. So I was like, no, 2023, I'm gonna make a change. And I did. Hell fucking yeah, I did. It was the scariest thing that I've ever done, but I did it. That being coming out to my mom. I decided on around the time of New Year's, because of how heavy it became for me, that the beginning of the year I would make a change. And I don't know on which day in particular it was. You can go and find the videos that I did. But I decided to finally come out to my mom that I'm trans. It's not like she wasn't aware of some of my weird behaviors and stuff. She knew that I had bought some bras and I had some feminine clothes and stuff like that. And I even once remember that she mentioned that there's a reason why they don't ask me about, doesn't ask me about why I have those bras. And it's not like she was completely unaware about it, but because of like some random situations throughout my life which she had been very like angry about, and like I would say, yeah, ultimately like angry about me behaving a certain way, I was scared about how she would ultimately react to me coming out as trans. Because there was one time where I was playing with my cousins and we pretended to be turned into women, and mom caught us doing that and she was frustrated about it. There was one time where she caught us cross-dressing, because I did turn my cousins, my younger male cousins, into cross-dressers for a little bit. And she was angry at me for it, you know? So I don't know how she would have reacted. I was scared about how she was going to react. I ultimately thought that she was going to be nice about it, but I was still worried about her reaction. And I decided I had no choice. I had to come out to her because I had to make a step forward, and I couldn't do it on my own. At the very least, I couldn't hide it from both my mom and my dad. You know? I needed at least her knowledge and support for it. So I did come out to her through a note, because the thought of speaking to her about this was way too terrifying. And even now it's still a little bit awkward for me to talk about this with her, but I'm getting better about it and I'm being more open about it, so it's getting fine, and she's becoming more like open about it as well. But she was kind of flustered, I feel like, a little bit. She wasn't angry or frustrated about it. She was somewhat worried about what if my dad found out, because he wouldn't be a big fan of it. He's a bigoted, conservative, transphobe idiot. And if he found out, there's a big likelihood that he would either beat me up or maybe even straight up kill me. I feel like the kill part is ultimately unlikely, but definitely he would severely beat me. And at this point, maybe even kick me out. That's why I'm really hoping that I can move out in the next couple of months. Because the changes from HRT are becoming increasingly hard to hide, and there's going to be a point at which he's going to notice that I look different, you know? And he's going to start to wonder why I look different. So yeah, she was a little flustered, but she was ultimately kind of overall okay with it. I don't really know how to describe it other than that. She wasn't happy about it. She wasn't like, oh, poor baby, yes, I'll do everything to help you. She ultimately did do that, but that's because she's a great parent and I'll always love her. But I still kind of had to pressure her into helping me out for a little bit, because I asked her to give me money to go to a therapist who deals with people like me. The only one that I did know about, because he's like a famous doctor or whatever. People shouldn't go to him. He's kind of a bigoted piece of shit a little bit. He's ultimately still willing to help you, and I've talked about him in previous videos from when I went to him in the beginning of 2023, so you can go and look the video, because I've explained it far more in detail there, but she ultimately gave me the money and I went, and it didn't really work out that well going to him. It kind of cleared my mind a little bit, but I feel like he's ultimately a product of his time, because he's like a 70-year-old doctor, but he was still willing to help me out, you know? But it was too expensive for me to go to him again, so I didn't. And I don't know, I just didn't really... I mean, I didn't have the funds to do anything anyway, but there was also just like the fact that I had made, I guess, the steps, so I didn't have the urge as much. But then I started to really worry about, again, transitioning and wanting to do it as soon as possible, because I was starting to get worried about losing my hair, because in my family, both my dad and my granddad, like everybody on both sides of my family, like the men, get bald, have been bald for a long time. So I was starting to really get worried about my hair, and my dad was even kind of like commenting about it, which didn't make it better. So I was really adamant to do it sooner rather than later, and start a transition sooner rather than later. And clearly going through with this guy was not an option, so I ultimately went and contacted a bunch of LGBTQ organizations that are present in my country. The particular one that I went with is called Single Step, and they deal with trans people heavily. Like, they seem to have been the ones to help me out the most, because I contacted like 3 of them, and they were the only ones to actually tell me what I wanted to know and guide me into what I wanted to do, you know? Because I asked all of them, hey, I am trans, I want to transition, can you tell me what I'm supposed to do? Can you help me with this? And a bunch of 2 of them were like, you have to do this and this, but they didn't really go into any details. They told me basically things I already kind of knew, and didn't really give me the information that I wanted. I can't exactly describe it, but like the one that did ultimately help me out, Single Step, actually told me, you have to go to like our psychologist for some therapy before we can help you go through the further stuff. So I went for a couple of sessions with a really, really great therapist that they have. I love her. She's amazing. She's helped me out with even stuff that are not trans related, just general like mental health stuff as well. So she's amazing. So I had to do a bunch of sessions with her, and then after that, everything basically happened very quickly. I went and froze some of my sperm, so in case I want children, because that was something that was weighing on me because of pressures from my parents, especially my dad. So I just wanted to like satisfy the version of him in my head that was pestering me about it. And after that, it was just basically waiting to go to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with gender dysphoria, which I was really happy about. And I went to the endocrinologist, he gave me the HRT, and here we are today. The final part of this story, especially when I started going to like the psychologist and I contacted the the LGBTQ organization I've actually done in vlogs. So if you guys are interested to see my actual like thoughts on the day of those experiences, you can find them on my Patreon and my Ko-fi account. They're available over there at the lowest tier, and future vlogs will be too. But yeah, that's basically the whole story of how I ended up being where I am today. And I feel so happy. Not everything is perfect, obviously. I still feel sad. I still feel depressed. I still feel like I still have like struggles in my life. It's not like getting the HRT has solved all the issues in my life. It hasn't, and it won't. But at the same time, it's made life worth living. It's made at least living in my own body not feel like pain and struggle. Because now I actually have the motivation to go through the hard stuff. Because before, everything was a struggle because my brain had to focus so much processing power on dealing with the dysphoria and stuff. But now I don't. Now with the HRT, it has basically freed up all of that processing space to deal with having to work and figuring out how to move out and live my life and being more confident and brave, you know? It's been quite the journey. And like I said, I feel like mine in particular is a very unique experience. If that helps guide any of you about your own feelings in regards to whether you're trans or not, I hope it does. I hope it does help you realize. But yeah, that was my experience. It's been a long, slow build-up of me as a person so I can finally have the strength to do what needed to be done. And honestly, I'm kind of proud of being trans in the sense that being trans is what has actually made me the person that I am right now, in the sense of if I wasn't trans, I wouldn't be as confident today. If I was just a cis man, I wouldn't be as confident today. I wouldn't be able to even consider the possibility of moving out on my own. I would still be a little introverted boy stuck in his room playing video games. So being trans has genuinely made me a better person. It's made me more confident. It's made me more capable. It's made me braver. And some of these qualities have been needed in my life, you know? Because my mom has started to struggle with quite a lot of health issues, and me becoming more capable to deal with stuff like that, like having to take her to the doctor and just being able to emotionally be there for her. I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't trans, because being trans and going through these experiences as a trans person that I had no choice but to go through build me up block by block into the person that I am today, into the woman that I am today. So I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. The only difference that I would have is starting HRT sooner. But I guess that would also affect my ability to kind of build up to the point where I am. And I honestly believe there is no timeline in which I started HRT sooner than I did. Because there's too many little pieces and building blocks that had to be built before I was brave enough, smart enough, capable enough, and mature enough to actually do the things that needed to do to transition, you know? Because like I said, I was a cowardly, introverted boy in like 2018. But in 2021, I had to become like more confident and brave enough because I had to get a driver's license. And if I didn't get the driver's license, I wouldn't be able to travel to the therapists and the psychologists that I've went through who diagnosed me with HRT and all and guided me into where I needed to go. I wouldn't be able to travel to the endocrinologist to be able to get my HRT prescription and all those stuff. So all these little things I feel like had to happen the way they did for me to end up where I am. And I don't know if there was going to be any other way that could have happened sooner. Maybe if I was born in America, it would have been different, but I was not, sadly. But I also could have been born in a much worse place, like the Middle East or Africa, where people like me are killed and they have literally no hope whatsoever about living their lives as happy people of a different gender, you know? Which kind of brings me to something that I've been feeling a little bit recently, which is kind of like survivor's guilt. And I feel like it's not even at its strongest said survivor guilt, because there are still some things that I need to go through as a trans person to really feel like I've made it. Because like I've just started HRT and barely 2 months and a half on HRT. I still have social transition to go through. I still have bottom surgery to go through, potentially maybe top surgery to get like a bigger breast size if it's needed, and facial feminization surgery if it's needed. So I still haven't made it per se, but I am sure that once I get there, the feeling of survivor's guilt is going to become so much stronger, because I already feel like I'm one of the lucky ones that I've been able to start HRT and been able to transition. And again, my situation is not perfect. I still need to move out to socially transition, and I'm still going to have to deal with my bigoted dad one way or another. But I could have had it so much worse. The fact that at least there is a light at the end of my tunnel is what's scaring me so much, because I've been also worried that maybe I am not one of the lucky ones. Maybe my story is not meant to end with a happy ending. But the thing is, even if it does end with a happy ending, plenty of others hasn't. Even in places where trans people are like, have it easier one way or another, because it's easier to transition, it's more accepted to be trans, like the USA or the UK, trans people are still killed. Their lives are still cut short for being trans, like the murder of Brianna J in the UK. So even if I was lucky to be born in one of those more progressive countries, I could still be killed. So what makes my particular story more likely to end in a happy ending, you know? And again, even if it did, what about them? They didn't get to live their happy life, so why should I? What have I done differently to deserve to get the happy ending and for them to not, you know? But yeah, I feel like I'm getting into too much like therapy stuff. It's something I need to discuss with my psychologist, not really with you guys too much, but when I start to ramble, it's hard for me to stop, so there's that. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about my journey to becoming the person that I am today. Hopefully you guys have checked out the other video where I talked about the changes that I have gotten on HRT from 2 months. But yeah, it's been great. I can't wait to see where further I'm gonna go with my changes. I hope that I'm gonna have some more major updates to give you for the 4th month update, because that's most likely when I'm gonna be doing it again. There needs to be decent amount of change for me to be able to like talk about it, to have something to talk about it. But yeah, it's been quite the journey and there's still so much left. But if I was able to help at least one of you come to terms with your own feelings or realize stuff about yourself, then I've done good. But yeah, share any thoughts that you guys might have in regards to this in the comments below, your own experiences or anything like that. Feel free to comment down below. Maybe even go to my Discord, which is linked on my channel. You can find it in my About page. Or if you just kind of like press on the arrow beside the profile picture on my page, you can see the link to my Discord, where there is a channel for like LGBT people where we can talk about stuff if you want, if any of you want that. But yeah, comment your thoughts in the comments down below and let's talk about it. But yeah, before we end this video, I just want to give a huge shout out to my currently one patron on Patreon, Deadpool. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot to me. You have decided to support me, have continued to support me such a long time. I hope you continue to enjoy my content and continue to support me going forward. Thank you very much. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, check out the link in the description to my Wattpad, where I post my stories, because in addition to doing all these videos on my channel, I'm also a writer. And if you don't enjoy my stories, or simply enjoy my videos, you can head over to my Patreon, my Ko-fi account, or my PayPal, where you can pledge support and help get the channel going, help support me so I can keep writing the stories you enjoy. But if you don't want to do any of these, that's completely fine. You can still help me out in other ways, like liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and especially sharing this video with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And I think it's pretty much it for this video, so hopefully I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye!